Hi, everyone. Hoping that you all are well. We're going to be discussing the deity in the New Testament identified as the Almighty. This is a very interesting deity, a very odd dynamic that has been revealed. This deity is the deity of the doctrine of discovery. This is the same deity that is the deity for the doctrine of conquest. This is the deity of the papal bulls. This is the deity of the colonial charters. And so clearly this is a non-indigenous deity, regardless of where you are talking about around the world. And so this deity is coming from a particular spiritual tradition. We're going to go into that. This is the deity of the rapture. This is the deity of the book of Revelation. This is the deity of Armageddon. This is the deity of what is known as the apocalypse. Now, there are some very odd correlations related to this deity, and there are connections between this deity and the Old Testament deities. There is also a relationship between this deity and Greek mythology, and there are some interesting notations related to the ancestry, if you will, of this particular deity. There is a noted conflict and conflation between this deity and the entity known as Jesus. And so it's a very odd dynamic, but this is definitely a deity that is a colonizer deity. It is a usurping deity, and it is also related to the collective of people known as the Scythians or the Scythians, depending on how you want to pronounce that. So let's get into this. And so first off, what we have is this deity is understood as the Almighty. Now, interestingly, we have, of course, talked about another deity known as the Almighty or the Almighty in the Old Testament. Interestingly, these deities are essentially the same. As indicated, this is a deity, the god of the apocalypse. And so this is the god of the revealing, the god of revelation. And very specifically, this is the actual deity, the god, if you will, that is in the book of Revelation. Now, of course, what we find when we are looking in scripture is that this English version of this name is not the actual name that is in the Greek. And so in translating back into the Greek, we find out the actual name of this particular deity that's in the New Testament, that is the deity of the book of Revelation. And that deity's name is Krator, also associated with Kratos. This deity is synonymous with El, Al, Hava, Yahweh, Set, and Shaddai. And also remember that Shaddai is Shaddai. Now we're going to turn to where we see this interesting reference to this deity in the book of Revelation. And so what we see is this deity is going by several characteristics. First of all, the deity is identified as great. And so that megalos, mega, okay? This deity is going by theo, okay? So it is going by that construct that suggests deity or God, G-O-D. But specifically, the deity has an identity, a name, and it is essentially Kratos or Krator. And here you can see more clearly this mega identifying mighty, and we've seen that before. And hopefully you can see this a little bit more closely here. So you have this panto kratoros, okay? And so that's supposed to be all and then mighty, sort of omnipotent. And so this is that deity that is identified throughout the book of Revelation. And what you see with this name is, and it's found at Strong's 3841, this is in the Greek, And it indicates that this name is essentially almighty by definition, meaning all powerful. Interestingly, it specifies ruler of all, ruler of the universe. Now, what makes this interesting is there are individuals actually going by names that translate in a very similar manner, this idea of world ruler, universal ruler. And so we see here this correlation between this Kratos and these Old Testament deity offerings. And so we see that this Kratos, is referring to dominion, but also corresponding to Shaddai or Shaddai. And if you recall, this is synonymous with the Egyptian deity Set. Also, again, translating as Almighty. Also correlating with Adonai. Okay, and that's in the Hebrew also. And so again, this is referencing this idea of supreme power over all of creation. And here you can see it again, and you can see this particular variation is mentioned 10 times. Again, here you see this identification of almighty, omnipotent, absolute, universal sovereignty. It's also noted that this particular entity is associated with the Apocrypha. And here you see that direct translation into the English out of the Greek, indicating omnipotent, all-powerful, most high, dictatorial, autocratic, almighty, preeminent, despotic, supreme, totalitarian, invincible. And so there are a number of dynamics that are going along with this Kratos construct that's coming out of the Greek. And here you can see the different occurrences of this particular construct in the Greek. And here you see something very interesting that comes up in some other passages outside of Revelation. It refers to this Krator or Kratos relating to this idea of seizure, to seize something, to hold something, to bind something, to grasp, retain, to keep. Again, referring to this idea of having power and strength. This name or this word, which is a verb, has a meaning of I am strong, mighty, hence I rule, am master, prevail, obtain, take hold of, hold fast. That's another interesting dynamic because there is an actual name in terms of ancestry, a European name that has a motto related to hold fast. And so here you can see this particular Ish clan that is associating itself with Kratos or Krator. This particular clan is Clan MacLeod. And so that whole idea of seizure and hold and take, this identity is associated with Clan MacLeod, as Clan MacLeod has adopted this idea, this trait, as its motto. And the motto of Clan MacLeod is, of course, hold fast, which is basically the same as Krator or Kratos. And it goes on to indicate that this Kratos refers to grasping, keeping, laying hold of something, seizing something. This construct is also wherein this conflict between this Kratos or Krator and the entity known as Jesus comes in. And so what is found in scripture related to this whole idea of Krator or seizure is that there is this idea of binding and seizing of people, and specifically with respect to this idea or this construct of the rapture. And so the deity that is identified as being associated with the rapture is, interestingly, this deity known as Krator. And so this is the seizing of the people deity. This binding and seizing construct, seizure construct in Scripture gets very interesting when this construct turns to the entity known as Jesus. In Scripture, there are multiple references to this seizing dynamic related to the entity known as Jesus. And this seizing is referring to Krator. And so with respect to this, what we are looking at is this deity, this character of this deity being in direct opposition to the entity known as Jesus. And as you should recall, there are dynamics within the Scripture talking about Jesus being seized and held and bound. What's noteworthy, however, is that this construct is tied to this word Almighty that's in the New Testament. And so we also see here with Kratos or Krator this idea of ruler. And so Krator is another way of saying dominion or ruler or government, sovereign, monarch, a crowned head, a head of state, a chief, a tetrarch, a tyrant, a despot, a dictator. So there's a lot that goes along with this Krator, Kratos identity. Now, as a deity, this Kratos is associated with brutality, violence, bondage, oppression, and mercilessness. This is interesting because, again, this is also the deity that is named with respect to the Battle of Armageddon. When reading about the Battle of Armageddon, initially, perhaps, you might have thought that the deity, that is the deity of Armageddon, was, if you will, the benevolent deity. However, when you do the translation, you find out that that deity is essentially Kratos. It is this Krator dynamic. This, of course, speaks to this pervasive dynamic of destruction that you see in the book of Revelation. And so with respect to Greek mythology, we have this Kratos or Kratos. There are a few spellings. And you see here, this translation is strength, might, and power. What's also interesting is this is translating to the Roman name Potesta. And because it looks so familiar, it does go along with Podesta. And so it's another variation of Podesta. What you see here with respect to this Kratos is this is the or was the deity or personified spirit or demon of strength, might, power, and sovereign rule. And here you see this reference to Kratos or Kratos and the entities known as the Scythians or the Scythians and their land, which is indicated as something that is untrodden and in solitude. There are a few places on earth that actually fit this description. And again, you see this identification with strength or power. And it's also indicating that this Kratos is the son of Pallas or Palant and Styx. And here you can see that Latin Italian translation. It indicates Podesta or Potesta. And of course, that means power. And it also indicates that Podesta in medieval Italian communes, these entities were understood as the highest judicial and military magistrates. And also remember that magistrate has that magi for the beginning of it. And yes, it still means the same thing. Now we also need to look at this Krator and the root. And so at the root of Krator, we have Krasi and Archi. And so you've seen these constructs before. You might have seen crassy and archy, but it's all the same because those two constructs are essentially the same as krator. And we've talked about both of these before. And here you can see the dictionary definition of this crassy, kratia, and you see that it is coming out of the Greek, meaning power and rule. And here you can see examples of autocracy and theocracy. Again, these are various types of government. Also referring to social and political classes, as in powerful people and specific social organizations. And again, you see this idea of power and strength, also referring to that which is hard or hardened. And here you see additional etymology information. It is a word-forming element forming nouns meaning rule or government by. And so when you see constructs such as democracy, that's where this is coming from. Also referring to power, might, and rule. And here you can see additional constructs that are growing out of this crassy or crat, C-R-A-C-Y and C-R-A-T, referring to government, rule, and authority. And if you look over to the right-hand side, you can see a number of constructs that are related to this crassy or this crat construct. And here you should be able to see it a little bit more clearly. And so if you are researching this, you will see this name spelled in a variety of ways. So you see this K-R-A-T-O-S, C-R-A-T-U-S, C-R-A-T-O-S. And here you see the mythological parents of this particular deity, this Styx and Pallas. And here you see this mythological ancestral information related to Kratos. And again, the mother of Kratos is Styx, and this is supposed to be a deity associated with oaths, O-A-T-H-S. This deity is also a water deity that is associated with the underworld and also related to Hades, H-A-D-E-S, yes. Now let's turn to the paternal side of this particular deity. So we have this Pallas or Pallant as the father of the deity. This Pallas or Pallant is identified as goat-like in appearance, a giant or a titan, and a deity of warcraft. And so all of that might help to explain the offspring known as Krator being a deity of chaos and destruction. And of course, you see all of this chaos and destruction in the book of Revelation. And so if you look at this construct of Revelation and Apocalypse related to the book of Revelation, you see that there is this revelation surrounding this Krator, because clearly most people probably do not think of the deity in the book of Revelation as a deity consistent with this Krator. However, if people are clear about what they are reading, they can clearly see that everything that we are talking about is manifested in this deity that is in the book of Revelation. It's a part of what makes Revelation stand out, quite frankly. And so with respect to Krator, we have this revealed identity, we have this duality going on, and then there is this dynamic of conflation between this Krator and a couple of other entities, quite frankly. And here you can see some of these passages wherein there is this conflict related to the entity known as Jesus and this Krator construct. And so you see this seizing and taking hold of and holding the entity known as Jesus. And all of those words that are referring to seizure and holding, these words are krator. And here you can see additional references related to the entity known as Jesus being seized in relation to this krator construct. And here you see Krator identified as the Almighty in 2 Corinthians and also in the book of Revelation. And here you see additional entries with Krator being referred to as the Almighty. And of course, this is tying Krator to Seth in the Old Testament. And so essentially they are one and the same. And so there really is not a change in deities. We just simply have a change in name because they essentially mean the same thing and they are translating as the same thing. And so here you see additional references to Krator in the book of Revelation as the omnipotent one, the almighty one. And so here we have this deity known as Krator operating as the deity of the doctrine of discovery, the deity of the doctrine of conquest, this deity of the charters, this deity of colonization, this deity of oppression, this deity of supplanting yet again, this deity of conflation, this deity that is a deity essentially grounded in power and strength and war and destruction. What's noteworthy about all of this, though, is that this is the deity that many people are worshiping, but giving this deity a different identity sometimes. However, there are also many instances wherein individuals are worshiping this particular deity in what is known as spirit and truth. They are calling on a deity of destruction. They are calling on a deity of war. They are calling on a deity of conflict and consternation. And if you listen to some of their prayers, you will hear this. There are many people who cannot wait for the deity of the book of Revelation to be revealed and to rise. You hear this in conversations, you hear this in sermons, you hear this in prophecies. And so there's a lot being called forth by the average person related to this particular deity. The question is, what are people actually expecting as the outgrowth of calling forth this type of deity? What is the outgrowth of worshiping this type of deity? What is the end result of leaning on this particular type of deity for one's soul salvation?